So far, we've covered hand drawing, the 5 major errors you'll come up against, and we've done an extrude part, fillet, and an extruded cut. And we've changed the colors of features. Here in Lesson 2F, we're going to learn how to prepare to emboss and engrave 3D lettering onto a part. So, we're almost ready to put some lettering on our tombstone, but we have to stop and think about this for a second. We want lettering in a specific place. If we just put lettering in the drawing, what's going to happen? It's going to wind up kind of near the origin, up and to the right of the origin a little bit. We can move it just by clicking in different places, and it will kind of jump to a spot to the right and up a little bit from where we click. One problem though, if we turned our headstone around backwards and cut the shoulders on what was originally the bottom, the shape would come out fine, but our origin might be up at the top right. Then our writing would be placed backwards and upside down, up near the right corner. Not good. And because writing is inserted as a sketch font, which is a special type of entity that doesn't do a lot of the usual sketch edit operations like revolving, moving, and scaling, it's not easy to fix. So we need to find a way to position the font accurately from the get-go, preferably in a way that we can move in a controlled fashion later on if we need to. Luckily, we can force the text to attach itself to a line. We can move that line or curve that line, and the font will go with it. So what that means is that we're going to use a reference line to position each font element we want to put in. If you're on your game, you'll remember that extruding a sketch with both a closed contour and a line will cause an error when you try to extrude the sketch. We're going to work around this problem by making our text positioning reference lines a freestanding feature that stays as a sketch and doesn't get extruded. There are other ways to work around this issue, which we'll see as we go along. In our case, since some of the font will be an extruded boss and some will be an extruded cut, it makes sense to create the text reference lines as a separate sketch, as those two operations would require separate sketches anyway. And it's easier to modify only one sketch later on to move around both types of lettering. So now that we understand that we're going to start by creating some font reference lines, what surface will we draw them on? Yes, on that front face of the pocket where the fonts are going to go. This is the one time in this drawing that we're actually going to create a feature that's not a 3D feature. So we're still going to select our surface to draw on, and that's okay, that's now the active surface. We want to look at it normal to the plane of the surface because we're going to do some 2D operations. But then, instead of grabbing one of the feature tools, we're going to manually activate Sketch. Now, you can always go into Sketch, make a shape, and then extrude it afterwards by selecting it in the feature tree and then selecting the 3D tool. I just prefer to go the other way around for 3D operations when it's possible, because it saves me a click, and at my age, you have to save all the time you can. We're going to activate the sketch mode by clicking on the icon at the left of the toolbox in the Sketch tab. You can see it's now active, and it says Exit Sketch, which means, do you want to exit Sketch? So we don't want to exit Sketch, but when we do, that's where we click. Now we're going to grab a line, just a straight line, and we're going to put it horizontally from this side over to the other vertical side. Now we have to avoid inadvertently snapping to the wrong entity while we do this. If we get the endpoint of our line on a point that is an endpoint of another line or a curve, it's going to lock onto that point, which means we can't independently move it up and down at that point. So we'll start the line here. It's actually on a curve, but that doesn't matter because it can slide along that curve. You can see that the line is turned thick and orange, which means that the start point is snapping to that curve. You can also see that you've got an indication of an intersection, so we'll click on there. We want this line to go across horizontally. We might get 1 or 2 indications that it's horizontal. And what is this? We have another line, a dashed yellow line that came off of our curve at 90 degrees to the tangent of the curve at the point where the line meets the curve. Usually, we go towards a straight vertical line and we'll get a nice horizontal line coming off. That line will be yellow and dashed when you're too far away to activate snapping, and when you get close enough that you're going to snap to it, the line will turn blue and dashed. We won't see that happen here because our dashed line isn't horizontal, but that's no problem because we'll still get our little box to tell us if our line is. We move the cursor over till we get an indication of snapping, we're horizontal, and we've got the intersect. Click! And we've got a nice horizontal line right across our face cut. Because we never intend to actually extrude anything from this particular sketch, it doesn't matter if this is a solid line. But just in case we wanted to actually put text reference lines and the actual lettering on the same sketch, I'm going to show you how to make it work. If we just drew a solid line and then put on our closed contour, we'd run into a problem when we went to extrude the sketch, because when we try to extrude the lettering, we'd also have this line that's not a closed contour, which would cause an error like the ones that we learned about in Lesson 1B. So I'm going to click on this line, and up pops our Line Property toolbox. In the options, we've got For Construction. So I'm going to click on that, and the line will change to a series of alternating long and short dashes, indicating that it's now a construction line. Construction lines will be ignored when it comes to being extruded. You could see the line a little better if I'd have used color other than teal for the cut-in. Maybe I should follow my own tips. Let me see if I can find a zoom level that works. You can see it a little better here. There we go. Now you can see the long dash, short dash, so that's a construction line. We're going to want to put the lettering arced across here. I just think that looks nice. So we're going to go and we're going to grab a 3-point arc. We'll set the start of the 3-point arc on the left end point of our horizontal line, and we'll set the next point of the arc on the right end of that line. And you can see we can drag the middle of the arc up or down. It won't change where the middle is. It's a symmetrical round arc. It'll just change the height. If I bring the arc up close to the top edge of that face cut, you can see that it lights up the line at the top in orange, and it gives us a little box with a circle with a line touching it. If we remember, that box is our indication of tangent. So if we click while that's visible, it's going to set a tangent relationship between that arc and that upper line, which means that no matter what we do with the positioning of the arc, it's going to just change diameters and stay stuck to that line. We don't want that. First of all, our lettering would be up off the part, and second of all, we couldn't adjust it. So we'll keep it here somewhere in the middle of nowhere. That way we're free to adjust it later. We'll just say yes to accept our arc, and once we've said yes to it and left the tool, we can then grab the arc and we can manually drag it to different diameters. Alternately, we can use dimensions to set it to a specific radius. We can leave the arc as a regular line, or we can make it a construction line like we did with the other one. Doesn't really matter because we're never going to extrude this sketch, like I said before. If we're going to put something else in this sketch that we are going to extrude, then it needs to be a construction line, but otherwise it doesn't. The alternate method of making a construction line, and this is the method that we would normally use when we are going to extrude things on the same sketch, is to select a center line from the Line tool drop-down. A center line is, by default, a construction line. We'll put that one down here on the bottom. This time, the line coming off normal to the intersection point is horizontal, and you can see when we're not aligned with it, it's yellow. When we are lined up with it and we're going to snap to it, it turns blue. We'll bring it across and we've got our indications that we're attached to the other vertical and that our line is horizontal, so we'll click and we'll press Escape. We've got our second text reference line. You can see that it has shorter alternating dashes than the construction line above, but like the construction line, the center line is a reference line and will be ignored in terms of any 3D operations. So that's all we need for now. We're not going to worry too much about the exact locations yet because we won't really know what looks good until we put the font on anyways. So we're good. We're going to exit Sketch and we're going to rename this new 2D feature Text Reference Lines. I think we can figure that out if we come back in a few months. So that's a good stopping point for Lesson 2F. We'll see you in Lesson 2G.